Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. Today's guest is Susan Im. During our conversation, you'll notice words and phrases appearing on the screen. We will go over those in detail in a segment called What'd You Say? For more information, you can go to our website at feellikeyouBelong.com. But for now, let's welcome today's guest. Today on Feel Like You Belong, we're welcoming Susan Im. Susan is an attorney in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Her firm, Im Law, focuses on U.S. immigration. Susan, thanks for coming by the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Alan.
You bet. Now, earlier we were talking, you said this is a particularly busy time of the year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it is. Every spring, really this month of March, is busy for us because April 1 marks the opening day of when U.S. employers are able to file what is known as H-1B work visa petitions for their highly valued, highly skilled professional workers. So, and these visas are capped every year at 65,000, a general cap, and 20,000 additional for U.S. master's degree holders, and they go like this. Particularly last year they did. So we are anticipating that they will go like hotcakes again very shortly after April 1. So we're busy. We're working with employers. We're working with the foreign nationals to get these petitions ready to be filed on April 1.
So what happens? Somebody picks up the phone, calls you. What do they say?
Well, sometimes it's phone, sometimes it's email, but typically what they say, it's usually initiated by a U.S. employer. Could be based in West Michigan, could not be based in West Michigan because it's federal immigration law. But typically they'll say, Susan, I have one of my valued engineers, one of our valued scientists and researchers here on an F1, visa status. They're here working on optional practical training. We've gotten to know this young man or this young gal, and they're just terrific. And we want to move forward with sponsoring them for the H-1B work visa so that we can move forward. Sometimes it's a little bit less detailed than that. It's, what do we do for this person that's been with us? It's been so wonderful, and we can't operate this aspect of our business without him or her.
And why do they need your help?
Typically, they're going to look to securing immigration counsel because the immigration laws are complex, particularly with regard to work visas and employment-based immigration. But what we do is we try to hold the employers and the foreign nationals' hands throughout the process. There's a lot of paperwork. There are documents that have to be certified by the Department of Labor before this H-1B work visa package can even be filed with the Immigration Service. So that's what we do.
So there are a limited number of visas available. What happens if you're the 66,000th person to ask?
Yes, and it happens. It happens every year. It happened last year on June 11th. It'll happen earlier this year. But what happens, Alan, is that the foreign national worker, if they were here in the United States, most of the time it is that way with our client base. They're here in the United States working on F1, which is an acronym. There are a lot of acronyms in U.S. immigration law. F as in Frank -1 is for the international students. We have so many of them attending our West Michigan schools included. And they have a finite expiration date of their ability to work in the United States, their ability to remain in the United States. So if that date comes around and they miss out on this particular window with the H-1B, they're going to have to leave the country, or they have to look at limited options of being able to remain either as re-enrolling in an F1 student program, maybe a higher, maybe they've gotten their master's degree, they're moving on to a PhD. Maybe they've got options like that, but typically then they're leaving the United States.
We hear there's a kind of lingo that is thrown about, and a lot of us are in the dark. I mean, we hear DREAM Act, we hear Path to Citizenship, Green Card. Can you give us just an overview, a layman's overview of the bigger picture of immigration?
Sure. Well, how much time do you have, Alan? I will.
A crash course for our viewers.
I'd be happy. I'll have to attempt that crash course. Well, there are two general ways that a foreign national can be present in the United States. They can either be here temporarily on what's known as a non-immigrant visa, the H-1B. It sounds like a disease, but it's that professional's work visa that we just talked about, the F-1 student visa. Those are temporary non-immigrant visas, ways that foreign nationals can be here. Then there are more permanent ways they can be here. When you talked about the green card. That's the coveted green card, that's permanent residency, the ability to indefinitely reside and work in the United States. Citizenship, one typically has to hold permanent residency or green card status for a number of years before one can even apply for the privilege of becoming a U.S. citizen. There are exceptions to that. Some, adopted children may qualify. Other children may qualify under a Child Citizenship Act. There are others that may qualify for exceptions. But it's one point that I'd really like to make is it's very difficult for foreign nationals to find the right non-immigrant visa category that they can apply for, let alone qualify for and obtain. It's even harder to move from the non-immigrant temporary visa status to permanent residence or green card status. One must do it in generally three different ways: an employment-based route, sponsorship through a U.S. employer, and there are very stringent requirements that an employer and the foreign national must meet, and it's usually a multiple-year, very complex process. Then there's family-based routes, through which a foreign national who's here temporarily on a visa, non-immigrant visa, could move toward green card status. Typically it's through the sponsorship of a qualifying U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident relative. But again, not a short process and typically a complex one. And then there is the diversity visa lottery program for folks that are from countries that are fortunate to be able to participate in the lottery process, 50,000 of those available per year.
It sounds very complex, so I'm glad there are experts like you helping folks come here and contribute their talents and their energies, because as we know, we're a nation of immigrants.
Yes.
And that's what has helped us excel, people who have motivation and drive and an interest in doing great things in their lives. So if you have someone who comes to this country, wants to work hard, but can't, what is the business impact? Do you have a story that helps us understand the downside of business if someone doesn't get into the system?
That is a great question, Alan. I can think of a distinct example in my client base. I won't reveal names, but will provide the detail that I can. As you mentioned, so many of these foreign nationals, they're valued, they're important, they bring the innovation and the ingenuity that we so need for the health of the Michigan economy, the growth of our economy, and really throughout the United States in general. And I can think of a Canadian entrepreneur who was a client of mine for many years. And in fact, he had been on approved, what's known as treaty investor status for many years. He had created and developed a very successful business in the portable sanitation industry and created dozens of U.S. jobs, very successful. And he ended up selling that business and deciding to move on to another business in the new energy industry. What was interesting about this particular client was he was at a very critical juncture from the business perspective. So he had already developed something very innovative in that new energy industry, had a lot of attention from the Michigan government, as well as some incentives that had been offered to him by the Ontario government, his own home country, with regard to establishing a manufacturing plant for his new energy business. And so he was at a very important business juncture. But right at that juncture with business, we had U.S. immigration involved, and really we needed to be able to approve him for a new treaty investor visa so that he could develop this business, really operate as the CEO of the new U.S. manufacturing plant. Well, that didn't happen, Alan. Unfortunately, we did a very detailed, very thorough e-visa package to the U.S. Embassy abroad, in this case Toronto, and his visa application was denied, even though he had met all of the requirements of the e-visa category. He had certainly done it in the past with the other business and did it with this business, but the response was, this is a very complicated case. We don't understand it. To which I responded, that's your job to understand it, even complicated e-visa cases. Please give this to a supervisor, and supervisory review was going to take 60 to 90 days at that time. And this is a successful entrepreneur and businessman who had very key meetings with distributors that were very interested in his product the next day, literally that week, and said, I don't have time for a 60 to 90 day supervisory review. So maybe we would have ultimately been successful, but in real world, as many of our business people and entrepreneurs know, you don't have 60 to 90 days to wait. And here's someone where the decision to establish a manufacturing plant, it hinged on U.S. immigration. So we ended up switching gears, Alan, abandoning that e-visa category and bringing him in under what's known as the trade NAFTA management consultant category, because he literally needed to be here that week to attend those meetings. And we did. But what happened as a result of that decision was he was not able, under the management consultant category, to legally direct and develop that new manufacturing plant in the United States. He would only be able to act in the realm of a consultant to highest management of that facility. And so the decision to put the manufacturing plant was made for him ultimately by U.S. immigration authorities. He put the manufacturing plant in Canada. There is and still is a sales and distribution facility in West Michigan, but those jobs should have been in West Michigan. And there's a concrete example of the idiocy of the brokenness of our system.
It seems like if we have a solid need for having him here, that
Right.
there would be somebody with common sense to say, hey, let's make this work.
Exactly.
So the bureaucracy is not working in his best interest and ultimately in the best interest of other Michiganders and
Right.
and the U.S. economy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, I'd like to talk a little bit more. So there's the business side
Sure.
of maybe a need to change some of our immigration law. A quick story about someone who has a family need for coming to the U.S. that
Sure.
you've tried to help, and it was a struggle.
Sure. Well, I think it's often surprising, Alan, to folks who are not familiar with our U.S. immigration system, how arduous and long the process is for folks who are legally trying to go through the system. We could talk for hours about, the immigrants and the undocumented population and the issues they face too, but let's talk about the folks who were actually able to help under the current laws. Citizens, U.S. citizens and U.S. permanent residents are able to sponsor certain relatives. And so even if you are the spouse or child under the age of 21 of a U.S. citizen, but you happen to reside abroad, even in Canada, but let's say you live in Nigeria or China, we have a lot of clients that come from all over the world, the process is very long to go through it legally. It can be often 1 year, even longer than a year, that the U.S. citizen is separated from that foreign spouse just to go through the system legally. And that's the best that it gets in terms of immediate relatives, spouses and children under the age of 21 or parents of a U.S. citizen that happen to reside abroad. You're looking at a year process, sometimes longer. And that's the best case scenario because they're at the top of the family immigration hierarchy. There are lots of folks that fall, much lower in that hierarchy and some horrendous waits. If you happen to be the Philippine brother or sister of a U.S. citizen, you're waiting over 20 years, over 24 years
That's a generation.
to be reunited.
How can you
reunited.
consider that a lifetime?
Right. Yeah.
So if you had to talk, if American legislators were watching us right now, what would you tell them? Clearly there's a business case, but what would you tell them about the need for changing, for making the system more humane?
Yes. On the family front?
Yeah.
Sure, on the family front, I think it really goes back to quotas and visa number allocations that were set in 1990 by Congress, and they're antiquated. They're not in line with today's demographics and what we need, both on the business and the family front. And I would urge our legislators, those that aren't up to speed on this issue, some of them are, but many are not, that this is not a humane system. It's not a humane system where families remain separated and even broken and torn apart because of multiple year bottlenecks in our system based on antiquated allocations set 2 decades ago.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So Susan has graciously agreed to stay for a second segment of this show, and we'll talk more on a personal side of immigration, but I'd like to thank her for helping us understand the complexities of U.S. immigration law.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Susan said that if companies don't have their applications filed in early April, they will miss out on this short window of opportunity. In the U.S., we often talk about opportunity as a window that's temporarily open. Americans believe we have to take advantage of a chance when it comes because the window may close again quickly and the opportunity will be lost. The next expression that was highlighted was a crash course. Susan said that there are a lot of details related to visas and immigration, so I asked her to give the viewers a crash course on immigration law. A crash course is a very quick explanation about a topic because there isn't a lot of time to give a more thorough presentation. If there's an emergency, people only want to know the most basic facts. If there is other difficult vocabulary from this conversation, you can look for explanations on the Feel Like You Belong website under the episode with Susan Im. Earlier this year, the U.S. Senate passed a compromise bill, S-744, the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. There are a dozen areas targeted for change. Let's take a look at the highlights of this 844-page bill. First off is the H-1B specialty occupation work visas. The proposal here is to increase the visa quota to a minimum of 110,000 with a ceiling of 180,000, representing an increase in 2 to 3 times the current limits. The second aspect is legalization. This provision would allow non-citizens who are unlawfully present and who entered the U.S. before December 31st, 2011 to apply for Registered Provisional Immigrant, or RPI, status. Under this provision, applicants would be required to pay a penalty fee and back taxes. Importantly, Dreamers would be eligible for citizenship immediately after obtaining green card status. The next section we wanted to highlight was the new non-immigrant invest visas and immigrant visas, or these are sometimes known as green cards. This provision would create a new visa category for certain qualified entrepreneurs who can meet certain strict investment, job creation, and revenue requirements. Fourthly is the E-Verify program. This would require employers to be using the National E-Verify database within a 5-year period. Lastly is the section about asylum. This provision would eliminate the 1-year filing deadline and would authorize asylum officers to grant asylum during what they call credible fear interviews. As of this recording, the U.S. government is in shutdown, but legislators are still optimistic that before 2013 expires, the House of Representatives will pass an immigration bill for the President to sign into law. To review these notes, please go to the section called What's Up on our website, feellikeyouBelong.com. So you're in your house or you're in an office and someone knocks at the door. You don't know who it is, so you say, "Who's there?" This knocking at the door is actually the basis for a classic American joke called the knock-knock joke. So if any American comes up to you and says, "Knock, knock," they're actually inviting you to participate in a classic form of humor. So in order to be able to participate in a knock-knock joke, you need some response. So I'm going to call in one of our camera crew, Chris. Chris, can you help me out here?
Sure, Alan.
So, everyone, this is Chris.
All right.
So, we're going to go through the joke for you right now. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Boo.
Boo-hoo.
Why are you crying?
Oh, that's awful.
So now, if you didn't understand this joke, you can either ask your American friends to explain it to you, or you can go to our website at feellikeyouBelong.com, where you'll also be able to find a list of some of my favorite knock-knock jokes. So, here are wishing you good life and good humor.